Hi, and welcome to Mrs. PM Reads. Today we are continuing in our story, Zoo. I'm just looking to make sure my mouse doesn't fall on the floor. uh, by James Patterson and Michael Ledwidge. We are still in book 4, if I'm saying that correctly. And we will be in chapter 63. Now, in our last video, Oz had a dream about taking his son Eli into the Museum of Natural History and the wolf coming alive and attacking him. And then he was headed, I don't remember where, to a meeting, I think, and he saw some odd dog behavior. So he got out to follow the dog, lost track of it, saw another one, followed that one into those descending stairs that have like gates that go into alleyways or apartment entrances or whatnot. Anyway, Oz tracked the dog to that set of steps, and dog was nowhere to be found. And that is where we stopped. So let's begin again in chapter 63. I heard the echoes of my shoes clattering down the fetid concrete stairs. I pushed against the doors. They creaked and groaned inward easily, making a wide gap against the bite of a heavy black chain. I presumed the dog had slipped through the gap. Why he had done so was a mystery. I squinted, peering through the dim gap. I thought about going into the library and finding out who might have the key to the lock. For about 4 seconds, I abandoned that plan and popped 2 buttons off my Oxford cloth shirt, squeezing myself feet first through the narrow gap. Inside, I found a light switch and turned it on. A feeble orange lamp flickered on above. It was a storage room full of lawnmowers, rakes, and other maintenance equipment for the park. Beside the equipment to the right were more stairs, leading to a downward sloping corridor lined with ducts and pipes. Ducts, D-U-C-T-S, not quack, ducks. The arched tunnel was made of old-fashioned faded red brick. I vaguely remembered that Bryant Park stands on the site of what had been the city's main reservoir in the mid-1800s. The curving tunnel went on for 10 feet and then opened up into a small round room filled with huge pipes, valves, everything gunked up with disuse and caked with orange rust. The largest of the pipes was open at the end and set sideways into the wall, about a foot off the floor, like a tunnel. I squatted down next to the pipe and caught a scent. Rank, musky, unmistakable. It was the smell of wet dog. Wet dog and then some. It was mixed with a lush potpourri of garbage, skunk, dead animals, and feces. It was a smell that could peel paint. There was some kind of moisture on the floor of the wide pipe, and the stench seemed to emanate from it like smoke from a tire fire. It was acrid, hideous. I stared into the reeking blackness for a long time. I thought of turning back, of dog attacks. Something about the complete focus of the dogs I had followed told me I was safe. I went into the pipe. It was like crawling into the, of Satan. Every 5 feet, I had to stop and repress the urge to vomit. My hands, knees, and feet squelched in the sucking black muck as I slogged my way through the tube. Darkness, stench, claustrophobia. In the pipe, I could hear sounds coming from someplace I figured was the opposite end. Yelping, whining, dog sounds. Eventually, I ran out of pipe. I stood up in the dark of some new room. The smell was even more concentrated here. Had I climbed into the sewer? There was a dim, barely luminous light on somewhere, a weak orange flicker. My eyes adjusted. Below me, the sunken floor of the ballroom-size underground chamber was moving. As far beyond me as I could see, there was a squirming mass of eyes, teeth, hair. The dogs were moving around and on top of each other in a way I had never seen before. They were slithering against each other like worms in a can. I was within scenting distance for all of them, but not a single one even turned toward me. Many of them were copulating. The dogs blanked impassively with slack tongues and unchanging expressions. Others looked sick, their hides mottled in what looked like a whitish mold. Small fights broke out here and there. A few dogs would come together in a sudden tumble of kicking legs, snapping jaws, and barking, blazing into sudden fits, one dog dominating and another surrendering with a pitiful whine. The other dogs skulking away quickly. The room was foggy and hot with moving bodies, wet with breath and tongues, snorting, sneezing, heads twitching, legs scratching. Along the wall of the chamber to my right, galleries had been carved in the raw dirt walls, and in them, female dogs were nursing puppies. The swollen dogs lay on their sides, their bloated bellies looking tender and thin-skinned, pink, jiggling with the weight of milk as the puppies suckled. I looked out across the squirming underground orgy of dogs. These dogs were acting as if they were organized somehow, as if they had a hive mind. They were acting more like insects than mammals. Then that light bulb clicked on again above my head. The hive mind. Bugs. That proved to be one of the keys to understanding what was going on. The animals were all acting like social insects, swarming, teeming, feeding, breeding. The sight reminded me of something I once saw on a research trip to Costa Rica in grad school. The time I saw an ant death spiral. It was an amazing thing. We came across hundreds and hundreds of ants, all running together in a giant spiraling circle. It was as though they were running laps, spiraling and spiraling together and squirming, black whirlpool of ants. It shows you the power of pheromones. Ants follow one another by their pheromone trails. When you see a line of marching ants, it means that each ant is following the chemical trail of the one in front of it, picking up the scent with their sensitive antenna. But every once in a while, something happens that breaks the pheromone trail. A log falls on the middle of the line, for example. And suddenly, some ant in the middle of the chain now finds himself at the front of a new one. He panics. He runs around like crazy, searching for another pheromone trail to follow. Eventually, he finds one and starts following this other ant. But unbeknownst to him, he's just found the pheromone trail of the ant in the back of his own line. And then the column turns into a loop that winds and winds itself, blindly following one another. Simply run around and around in circles until they die. And I thought, pheromones. I hope I'm saying that right. Chapter 64. Into Russia, 25 kilometers south of the Arctic Circle. Scrambling, huffing, nearly 10 meters up in the tree, Czeslaw Prokopovich stops climbing and tentatively leans out, distributing his weight carefully along the limbs of the Siberian pine, which are getting thinner as it's hiked. Through the mesh of crisscrossing branches, he can see for several kilometers down the rocky river valley, its horizontal visual panorama interrupted only by the tall and starkly looming transcontinental radio tower that is the reason for the village's existence this far north. But sightseeing is the least of his concerns this afternoon. Prokopovich carefully unstraps his rifle from his back and flicks a downward glance at the forest floor, looking for the other members of his hunting party. From this height, Sasha, Jurg, and Kirill look identical. The three Russians are wearing army boots and cheap camouflage hunting coveralls. All of them are stocky, bald, and chunky featured, as if they're built out of rocks. Lifelong friends and residents of Inta, the four men had worked together in the nickel mine that opened up in the heady times after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Their annual late summer hunt is supposed to be a time of respite before the snow and ice come, before the Arctic temperatures drive them inside and underground for 6 months beside the fire. 6 long, boring, maddeningly sedentary months of bottomless cups of vodka and endless cans of Durac. All year, Prokopovich anticipates this excursion, especially the sunny moment before he bags his elk. That full body trembling of excitement, the childlike splashing of his heart inside his chest. His heart is splashing now. Prokopovich thinks as he breathes on his rifle scope and dries it with his sleeve. The weapon Prokopovich presses to his cheek is a handcrafted Mosin Nagant hunting rifle. Through the scope's reticle, he scans the boreal forest of evergreens, firs, and pines that green the landscape. He is looking for any slight sign of movement. Specifically, he is looking for the wolves that had been chasing them since this morning. There are several dozen, maybe more, the biggest and most aggressive wolves he has ever seen. Why so many wolves have decided to pack together and come after them, Prokopovich does not know. He only knows that if Kirill had not woken up early to take a piss and seen them in the distance, the wolves, loping up the mountainside like lava flowing in reverse, they might already be dead. Prokopovich rests the sight of the rattletrap rail bridge that spans the ravine they crossed earlier. The abandoned rail line was built by Gulag prisoners in the 1950s when Inta's network of government labor camps was still running. Their plan had been to head up the mountain across the dilapidated old bridge. They thought the wolves would be unable or too afraid to cross it. Up in the tree, he spies the bridge through the rifle scope, waits, and watches. Prokopovich is thinking about his wife when the wolves break cover from the tree line en masse and head for the ravine. Some exclamation in Russian. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce it. Prokopovich mutters to himself as the animals head straight for the bridge. He watches as they begin to fastidiously work their way across, gingerly picking over the decrepit wood ties and iron beams, one by one, paw by nimble paw. Bleya, maybe. Prokopovich says to the sky, and more Russian, and a bad word and another bad word. I think we're going to stop there. That's the end of the chapter. This guy's not happy that the wolves are crossing the bridge. All right. Well, thank you for joining me for Mrs. PM Reads. Interesting notice by Oz about the dogs. And I'll be curious to see what happens in Russia with the wolves. So if you're curious too, you'll have to come back and see. All right, you guys. Have a great day, and I will see you next time.